Freeman had just finished his watch at 4 a.m. He was a crew member aboard the 117-foot-long tall-rig sailing ship named the Marquis. Some of you might recall reading about this ship in the news accounts. It was one of 39 tall-rigged ships racing from Bermuda to Nova Scotia. He said, for some reason, I stayed up on deck. The boat was sailing along really well and quite fast, and it was a nice feeling to be up there on deck. That decision probably saved his life. Quote from a survivor later, "It was totally unexpected. It was incredible in its velocity. It was a freak hurricane. The ship was on its side in less than 10 seconds. She started to go under in 30 seconds. The squall knocked the ship over like a day sailor." According to one of the British owners of the Marquis, who was in Bermuda at the time, he said, "It seems incredible to me that a ship that size was driven under like that. It would have to have been a wind of absolutely phenomenal proportions." The Marquis went down in less than a minute. 17 were killed. Only 9 survived. The rescued sailors called the fatal force that capsized their ship a rogue wind, R-O-G-U-E. a rogue wind. And they said there was absolutely nothing we could do about it. A rogue wind. All sailors know about it. It's a wind that is sinister in nature, totally unexpected, but fierce, carrying a lethal force. And I was fascinated by the news account where one of the survivors said it meant to kill us, and there was nothing we could do. It all happened so fast. And for some of you, the rogue wind was that unexpected phone call in the middle of a lazy afternoon when the voice on the other end of the line said, "Dad was just taken to the hospital. Mom just had a stroke. No, the test that Aunt Jane was having is a little more serious than we thought." And with whatever the news was, when you heard it, it struck you that life as you knew it was never going to be the same again. Things are going to be different now. For others, it was that regularly scheduled meeting with a boss that you worked for some time who said sort of out of the blue, "John, we can't employ you any longer. Ted, I have some bad news for you. Things haven't turned out the way we had hoped, and you're going to be out of a job, but you'll land on your feet." A rogue wind. For others, it was that thoroughly enjoyable evening with the person you've been dating for over a year. You bring her to the door and she says, "Dave, there's something I have to tell you, and it can't wait any longer." And you hear the Dear John letter that this time comes in oral form, but it's equally devastating. It's a rogue wind. Others, it was even worse than that. It's when one of your parents called you into the living room to announce that after 30 years of marriage, your father or your mother wants out. Rogue winds. Sinister in nature, totally unexpected, incredible velocity, lethal force. Jim has just been involved in a serious car accident. Robin has cancer. Judy's pregnant. No more extensions, Frank. I've got to close you down. Rogue winds that make your whole life pass before your eyes in an instant. You get the empty feeling in the pit of your stomach. Your head spins. Your mouth is dry. Your neck is hot. And your faith turns cold. And many of us in those moments, for varying reasons, whisper, "Oh my God." Friends, rogue winds are nothing new. Our ancestors of antiquity were occasional victims of them too. You would all know, perhaps the most famous of them, a man named Job, who heard in the course of just a few hours that his oxen and camels, all of his herds had been stolen, his sheep had been killed, his servants had been killed, and all of his children who were in a celebration at one of the older children's homes. Fierce wind came, knocked the house down, all were killed. And it wasn't just that. As you know, shortly thereafter, Job was stricken with boils from head to toe. And his wife said, "Why don't you just curse God and die?" Rogue winds hit biblical characters. Rogue winds have hit all types of people throughout history. Rogue winds have hit people in my church, like the family who lost a 28-year-old in a drowning accident this summer. And I stood at the gravesite and tried to console them. Like another family whose 10-month-old baby recently got into some furniture cleaner and poured those toxic chemicals all over her head and burned her lungs almost beyond repair. Like a man that I led to the Lord a few years back who told me one day as we drove down the highway he was crying so much we probably would have been better off going off to the side of the road. He told me how his first wife had died of leukemia in his arms after a horrible time of suffering. And he remarried, and he was saying how it was all new horizons and how glad he was to have a whole new life. And just a short time ago, he was greeted with the news from her lips that she too has leukemia. Road winds. They happen to biblical characters, people throughout history, people in my church, people in this school. They've happened to me. Not many, not as many as I deserve. But I got a phone call from my brother that was short. Bill, Dad is gone. A sudden heart attack. And I don't want to be a prophet of doom this morning. It knows delight in doing that. But I have to inform you that the odds are heavily weighted that a road wind will greet you someday if it hasn't already. I don't know to what extent you'll be hit. I don't know how much damage will be done. But be reminded this morning that God promises nowhere in His Word that people, even Christians, will be insulated from adversity. To live is to be vulnerable. Every seaman knows that you sail on the seas of life long enough. It's only a matter of time before a road wind arrives unannounced. And as one of our elders was discussing in a home where I was trying to minister to some people who had gone through some adversity, one of our elders said rather wistfully, stop and think about it. Every treasure you have will be stripped away from you someday. Your loved ones, either by separation or death, your friends, maybe your money, possibly your health, someday life itself. Everything is vulnerable. Except that is, one thing will never be stripped away from you: your relationship with Jesus Christ. For our purposes this morning, I would like to speak directly to the topic of how to stay steady in the storm. The storms are coming. I don't know when, I don't know with what force, but the storms are coming. And the real question is this: how will you react? Will you be caught unaware and unprepared, sleeping soundly beneath the decks with no way to escape? Or will you be as wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove? Will you be watching and waiting? Will you be prepared? Will you have everything on the decks of your life firmly fastened down, your foul weather gear on, your safety harness intact, so that even if you get washed overboard by a road wind, you can still pull yourself back aboard and survive the storm? Which will it be? And fortunately, our Lord, in His grace, has seen to it to supply each of us with a storm survival manual. A manual that describes how to stay steady in a storm. And I want to just list a few instructions that come from that manual, describe them briefly, so that you this morning might leave this place a little more prepared for the arrival of a road wind. The first instruction is that in order to be prepared for the arrival of a road wind, you must know what to believe. When a road wind comes, you must know what to believe about God and about storms. You must know what to believe. I had the blessing of being, I still have the blessing actually, of being sort of a lifelong student of sailing. It began early in my life as my father taught me how to race sailboats when I was 8 or 9 years old. Small sailboats on inland lakes. Sometime later than that, my father purchased a 45-foot sailboat in Dublin, Ireland, and he few others sailed it across the Atlantic Ocean. It was then moored in the Great Lakes in South Haven, Michigan, and I have been learning ever since how to sail and how to race. We've been in the Mackinac race and the Queen Cup race and so. But I can recall as I was first learning to sail on the high winds and seas of Lake Michigan, that when an unexpected squall would hit and I would be on the helm, several things would happen very quickly. The boat would heel way over to one side, items would fly off the shelves down below, everything unsecured on deck would go to the low side, the waves would crash and the wind would howl, and I would, even as a small lad, begin to feel the power of nature. And I experienced fear and even a bit of confusion, and my dad, in an effort to teach me how to become a seasoned sailor, would say, "What are you going to do, Bill? What are you going to do?" And because I was fearful and somewhat confused, I would panic and bark out wrong orders. And I would choose a bad course. I would suggest poor adjustments for sails, and find myself then in even worse trouble than if I had just stayed steady. Poor decisions as a result of panic and fear and confusion. And I would think to myself, everything is out of control. My dad, on the other hand, when he was at the helm and would be the victim of an unexpected squall, would be steady and poised. He was never cocky because he respected the seas. But he knew all about storms. He was in 5 days of hurricane on the way across the Atlantic. He could see squalls coming a long way off. He could judge their velocity and force, and he knew how to react. Big difference. The big difference being he had more knowledge, more experience with squalls than I had. I find the same thing in a way to be true in life amongst believers and unbelievers and new believers. When people are suddenly hit by a rogue wind, it seems that the first reaction to those untrained is panic and confusion and fear and frustration, and they think everything is up for grabs, everything is out of control, and they conclude carelessly, no one is home in heaven. So in their panic and frustration, they begin making poor decisions. They start saying things they shouldn't say, such as, God killed my baby. God ravaged my son. God gave my husband cancer. How could he do it? You see, when they say such things, they're not reasoning clearly or coherently. They're confused, they're fearful, they're frustrated, they're panicking, and they say things they shouldn't say. And they do things they shouldn't do. As a young female said to me recently, I was panicking, I was fearful. I didn't want my folks to know, so I aborted the baby. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I shouldn't have done it. They say things they shouldn't say, and they do things they shouldn't do, and they make bad decisions. They go into isolation, they stay away from the church, they become bitter and resentful, and they end up in worse trouble than they would have been if they had just stayed steady in a storm. Now you contrast that with what a mature believer learns to do over time. A mature believer who knows what to believe. If he knows what to believe about God and what to believe about storms, then he is one who over the course of time learns how to stay steady and poised in the face of forced hand winds. What I have tried to counsel people over the years at Willow Creek is that even when the rogue wind hits, there are some basics that have to be held on to, no matter how difficult that seems at the time. And the first basic is this. Even though our God allows a certain amount of adversity to come our way, our God is not the author of evil. Even though our God allows for adversity to come our way, He is not the author of evil. And I remind our people that God created Eden. Perfect creation, perfect creatures. And man, through the exercise of His will, brought on sin and the consequences that have stained society and the world from that point on. It's the evil one who comes and who loves to steal and kill and destroy. God is never the author of evil. The second basic I encourage them to hang on to is that even though the storms seem fierce, God has promised to limit the severity of storms, to give you the absolute assurance that you will be able to endure them. What a precious truth that is. Almost any of you who have experienced a road wind know that when the wind first started to blow and when you first heard the news, when the tragedy came to your full attention, the evil one planted seeds in your mind to this effect. This is a tragedy I can't handle. This is a storm that will wipe me out. This is a disappointment I'll never get beyond. But God says in His Word, I will limit the extent or the severity of the storm so you can live with the absolute assurance you will be able to endure every storm that comes your way. The precious words of the prophet Isaiah in chapter 43, do not fear. I have redeemed you. I have called you by name and you are mine. Now listen to the promise. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, listen now, they will not overflow you. The rivers will not overflow you. And when you walk through the fire, you will not be scorched, nor will the flame burn you, for I am the Lord your God. I don't know about you, but a promise like that is hidden securely in the vault of my heart. The third basic I remind our people of is that God is never more real to a believer than in the middle of a storm. He's never more real than in the middle of a storm. Psalm 34, verse 18. God is near to the brokenhearted, and He is close to those who are crushed in spirit. Ask any believer who has turned to the Lord in the middle of a storm. They'll tell you. They'll say something like this: God was so real. God was so tender. God was so comforting to me. And they would like to stand in front of a group like this and shout what the psalmist shouted in Psalm 23. Even though I had to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I feared no evil, because God was with me and He comforted me. It's interesting to me how many Christians say they really want to feel close to the Lord. But very few Christians want anything to do with adversity, which is gives us one of the primary opportunities to have that experience of the comforting presence of our Lord. And the fourth basic I remind our people of is that God has the miraculous ability to weave the disasters of our lives into a fabric of purpose and blessing in the long haul. At the time, it doesn't seem so. It does seem that everything is out of control, and that no one is home in heaven, that no one is at the helm. And yet that verse that every true believer loves after the storm, not during the storm, after the storm, is Romans 8:28. And we know fact, God causes, not fate at work, God causes all things, not just good, good and bad, fair winds, road winds, to work together for good, His good, your good, to those who love God, condition, and who are called and obedient to His purposes, condition. And in my 10 years of ministry now, I have seen some amazing illustrations of that truth. I've seen people fired from positions of great responsibility only to find a year later that they were better suited for a different career. I have seen people who were forced to leave a ministry find a new opportunity in greater fields of harvest. I have seen illnesses that produced family healings. I have seen bankruptcies that brought security in someone's relationship with Christ. I have seen adversity make hard men soft, independent men humble. I have seen adversities make calloused people soft. And I've experienced that in my own life. But my point is, when you know what to believe, and when you hang on to those beliefs in spite of the storms, you find those convictions will form a type of ballast that will keep you steady in a storm. And mature believers know that character is never developed in the harbors. Character is never developed on seas of glass. Character is developed in storms. Now, it's not only important what to believe, it's also important, your second principle in the Storm Survival Manual reads this way, it's also important for you to learn how to grieve. Now that sounds strange, doesn't it? We hear sermons, read books, go to seminars where we are taught how to win, how to score, how to be happy, how to be healthy, how to be wealthy, how to succeed. But suddenly, with deadly force, a rogue wind strikes our ship, knocks us flat, we lose a loved one, we experience the tragedy we never thought could happen, and we realize that we don't have a clue how to handle a rogue wind. We don't know how to react, cope. We've never taken a course in how to fail. We've never taken a course in how to lose. We don't know how to crash. We don't know how to grieve. And yet the Bible speaks clearly to this subject. It bothers me when people say that the Bible isn't relevant to life. Goodness, when I hear people say that, I want to leap over my desk and say, read it, pal. Read it. It speaks to the issues of life that really make a difference. And the Bible suggests many ways to handle grief, but for the purposes of conserving time, I'll only mention two here. And they're going to sound so simple to you. Some of you have gone beyond them and maybe need to come back to them. How to grieve when a rogue wind strikes. Psalm 62, verse 8. Pour out your heart to the Lord. Pour out your heart to the Lord. I know a lot of people who memorize that verse and just don't really know how to do it. They don't know how to tell it to the Lord. They don't understand when the Bible says our God is a refuge. Tell it to the Lord. And I would even counsel you to tell it to the Lord in the way that you're feeling it. Like David did in Psalm 73, where he said, I'm sorry, God, but it bothers me to see wicked people prosper. And as he prays in what most people would consider to be a careless, irreverent fashion, by the time he gets to the end of his prayer, he senses the resolve. When the Lord ministers back to him, I'll settle my accounts at the day of reckoning. Be patient. to encourage our people to be that honest with the Lord, that transparent. Tell the Lord, tell him all about it. And not only tell it to the Lord, but leave it with the Lord. It's a second basic. I don't think many Christians really know how to do a very simple thing. 2 Peter 5:7, cast all your cares on him. Because he cares for you more than you'll ever know. Tell it to the Lord and leave it with the Lord. And see what he does with your grief. I remember clearly when I lost my dad. I wanted to do everything to talk to the Lord about that. And one day I just said, Lord, how could you take a 53-year-old Bible father of mine? How could you do it? And as I went on with that prayer, by the time I ended that prayer, I was thanking God for giving me a father who was not just a father but a friend, and who was not just a friend but the greatest inspiration of my life. And I ended that time worshiping as opposed to complaining. And I also said to him, Lord, my heart's so heavy, I don't think I can continue in ministry. I don't know how I can go on. And I kept saying, Lord, so take my grief. I'll leave it with you. I'm casting it upon you. You say you care for me. Slowly but surely, he put me back together. From that low wind. I don't know what your low wind is, but tell it to the Lord and leave it with the Lord. It's important to know what to believe and know how to grieve. And finally, one last one. It's not all that profound. It just works. It's just practical. It's just helpful. You have to know whom to lean on. And those of you who know me well, because you attend Willow Creek, know how often and how passionately I express the need for Christians to be brothers to one another and sisters to one another. A few years ago, when I was out on the ocean with 3 Christian brothers from the church, we were hit by a squall. It hit with such force that it tore a hole in our mainsail. One of the men and I crawled up on deck and spent an hour and a half repairing that sail as the waves were crashing over the deck. Another brother took the helm and another was working the charts because there were reefs in our area. And when we finally made it to shore, dropped anchor that night, we sat in the cockpit of that sailboat and relished the thought of having been a team. That squall could have been a disaster to a solo sailor. You see, even minor squalls can prove to be dangerous or fatal to those who sail alone. And that's why I'm sure you're all familiar with the text in Ecclesiastes 4 that says 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor, and if one of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. And I know to those of you who hear me often, I sound like a broken record. But I don't apologize for making this repeated emphasis. Christians can't keep sailing solo. They've got to form brother-brother relationships, sister-sister relationships. They have to solidify those relationships so that they can lean on each other. Encourage, lift up one another. If a storm hits some of you today, and I would speak as openly to faculty and administration members as I would to students. If a rogue wind hit some of you today, you'd be alone at sea. You need a brother. You need a sister who will pray and support, remind you of truth, and stick with you. And I would encourage you to work toward building those relationships as soon as possible, before the rogue wind strikes. Friends, in closing, storms are on their way. I don't know when, I don't know how fierce, but they're on the way. And let me remind you of these great truths. Be prepared by knowing what to believe. Be reminded our God is not the author of evil. He will limit the adversity so that you can bear up to it. He is near to the brokenhearted, and some of you will sense His presence in a way you've never sensed it before. And He will weave even those disasters into a fabric for good in your life. Know what to believe when the whirlwind strikes. Know how to grieve. Start today being honest with God, pouring your heart out to Him about everything in prayer. And know how to leave your burdens with the Lord. Know how to grieve. And know how to lean on brothers and sisters. Build relationships with brothers and sisters right on this campus so that the team can pull together and survive the storm. Every single one of you can learn how to stay steady in the storms. You really can. God has made it possible. Shall we pray? Oh Lord, we've been reminded this morning that we're not insulated from adversity. And it's so important for us to be prepared for the road winds. How I pray that every brother and sister in this place, administration, faculty, students, how I pray that by cooperating with your Holy Spirit, every person here would be in the process of preparing themselves for the arrival of a road wind. When they strike, may we hold on dearly, firmly, to the truths about God, the storms. May we learn how to grieve. May we share them with brothers and sisters who really count, who really can be depended upon to build us up, to support us through those times. May your hand of protection be on everyone in this place. For Christ's sake.
Thank you, Bill, for those words. Why don't you rise for the benediction? And remain standing afterwards until give whoever happens myself a chance to get back, so those of you who'd like to read him and visit with me. Peter ends his epistle with a promise, as he also has begun speaking of the suffering, saying, "And the grace of all, and the God of all grace, who called you to His eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will Himself restore you and make you strong, firm and steadfast. To Him be the power forever and ever. Amen."
Can I get a copy of the text?